Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Shane, and welcome back to the Horror Basement and part two of the classic horror review series. Now, first off, you'll have to excuse me because allergy season has destroyed my voice, so you'll just have to bear with me on that one, and hopefully by the next video I'm feeling better. But the second movie we have in the classic horror review series is The Last Woman on Earth from 1960. Now, the basic premise of this is that a young lady named Evelyn and her two male companions, being her husband Harold and his lawyer Martin, are seemingly the last people on Earth when they come up from a scuba excursion while on vacation in Puerto Rico and find that everyone else on Puerto Rico and presumably Earth is dead. Now you may be thinking to yourself, that's a decently interesting hook for a horror movie. I could make a good episode of The Twilight Zone or something. Simple, interesting, you kind of see where it's going with the love triangle angle. But as I'll get into here, I will explain how this movie fails to deliver on that almost entirely. Now, the movie actually opens up with our heroes, protagonists, the only three characters in the movie, after about 10 minutes, all meeting up at a cockfighting ring. Because I guess they wanted to let you know that this is taking place in Puerto Rico. And either they just showed real cockfighting and a real chicken getting murdered by another chicken, or the chicken that takes the dive is the best actor in this movie. Now, the characters get to talking, and essentially, Harold, the husband, is down here vacationing. He's living it up, watching chickens get murdered, drinking a bunch of booze, gambling his money away. And we learn through dialogue between him and his lawyer, Martin, who actually has the same name as the lawyer in the last movie we talked about, The Amazing Mr. X. So when I first watched this and I was taking my notes, I have those here, taking my notes to do this review, I paused the movie and screamed out at the top of my lungs, all lawyers are named Martin. And then went back to watching the movie. But it's hinted at throughout the film that Harold is a very unscrupulous businessman and got his money through basically criminality. He says something to the effect every year they sue me and it's cheaper to have Martin take care of it than actually follow the rules. So through dialogue between the three characters here, we figure out that Harold and Evelyn's marriage isn't a happy one. She basically married him for the money and is now sad because basically he bosses her around and she feels like she lacks a sense of autonomy in her life. But Harold knows that taking her out scuba diving will help that. So they all go out on a day trip and go under, and when they emerge, the driver of the boat, along with everyone else in the world, presumably, is dead. There's something going on that the oxygen disappeared, but then it just came back once they were back on land and had to breathe. And it's never really explained in the movie why or how this happens, and it's kind of explained away by Martin saying act of God, bigger, better bomb, what does it matter now? And that's basically the first instance of this movie trying to be deep and say something meaningful and just falling flat because one, the screenplay, the writing on this is bad, and all three of the actors are very wooden and not very fluid in their delivery, so all the dialogue sounds kind of stilted, and they're just kind of standing around, stating their lines, and then, next scene, and do it over again. But they get back into, I guess it'd be San Juan, and they have to escape the stench of all the dead bodies, which is essentially just like they paid 10 or 15 extras to lay down on the ground and feign death. They had a stuffed toucan that they just laid on the ground, just like, oh, the toucan's dead too. So to escape the stench of the extras, they go to this mansion. I guess it's at the top of the hill in Puerto Rico, where the state can't get to him. And Harold decides that since he's the husband and the strong millionaire businessman, he's going to take charge and he's going to, pull everyone together. And his plan is to just start fishing and eventually get off Puerto Rico and go back to America and move and then leave Puerto Rico and go back to America and move north to avoid the stench of the dead bodies and all the bugs that are starting to infest Puerto Rico. And Martin's counter idea is that nothing matters and we're all fucked, and I'm going to have sex with your wife. And that essentially sets up the primary conflict for the rest of the movie, where Harold is kind of, he's setting out nets and fishing and trying to be, everyone be sensible, and Martin is kind of going behind his back and starting this romance with Evelyn, who is, more than reciprocating, but at the same time concerned about alienating Harold and splitting up their marriage or whatever. And eventually Harold goes out fishing, and they do Evelyn and Martin do end up having sex like off screen, and Harold finds out about it, and Harold and Martin have their first of, I think, 2 or 3 fights they have like on various beaches, where it's, in the movie it's painted as this very serious, like they're fighting for like life and death, but the way it comes across, just the way it's shot and the way the actors are performing, it's kind of more of like a wrestling match and slap fight in the waves, until finally Harold grabs a rock and just bashes Martin in the head with it, and says basically like, you've got to go. And then he goes inside and forces himself onto Evelyn. Now this is as soon as they like embrace, after she says like, no, don't, that also cuts, so there's no actual like nudity or sex in the film. But so far, with a runtime of 71 minutes, the only things notable about this movie thus far is I saw a chicken get killed by another chicken, and implied marital rape. So I'm not having a great time so far watching the movie. But Martin devises a scheme to where he's going to take the car and go and leave Harold and Evelyn to themselves at this mansion on the hill. But in reality, Evelyn's going to like jump out of a bush and get in the car as he's driving away, and they're going to make their escape, essentially marooning Harold on the island, and just to live out the rest of his life in solitude. But of course, Harold realizes this and gives chase, and Martin leaves Evelyn alone in a church, which is set up to be like where the climax of the film happens. And Harold and Martin fight again on the beach, and there's this like protracted like 5-minute chase scene through these big like it's almost like a fortress. Imagine it's an old military installation on Puerto Rico from back in the day, if that's even where they shot this. And this chase scene really seems tacked on. Like they got done filming and they realized that their movie's only like 55 minutes and they got to go back and like pad it out. Because there's these long, wide shots of them just kind of half sprinting around this castle or fort. And in the course of their fight, Harold manages to beat the shit out of Martin some more and also hit him in the head with the butt of a shotgun. So finally their chase leads them back to the church, and Martin kind of stumbles up to the front of the church and gives his last soliloquy about how life is meaningless and there's no point and it's all bullshit. And he's kind of been doing the kind of existential nihilism talk for the whole movie, but it came across as just being more crazy than anything because of the weird like wooden delivery from the actor. It doesn't really make sense for Martin to come off as the crazy one when Harold is ostensibly supposed to be the bad guy of the movie. But after he gets done his gibberish tirade, he just kind of lays down and puts his head back and dies, presumably of the multiple concussions that Harold has been doling out to him throughout the course of the movie. And with their only other human contact gone, Harold and Evelyn kind of shrug at each other, and Harold's like, "Let's go home." And then they walk out of the church and presumably go home. Now, like I said in the last review, I'm using a binary scale. Like either I recommend you watch the movie or I don't. And with this one, I'm going to have to say I don't. Give it a thumbs down, don't recommend, whatever you want to call it. Because, and it's not even that I'm mad or triggered by the dead chicken or the bad fight scenes or the insinuated rape. It's just that this movie really fails to deliver on its premise, and it's boring. You wouldn't think an hour and 10-minute movie would be able to like drag and be boring, but this one does. It feels like a 2.5-hour movie where you're just watching people fish and do nothing for the most part. And the climax of the payoff is, it lets you down because it's so clearly shot on like a shoestring budget. That being said, on a more positive note, we're going to go ahead and draw the next two movies. For those, and hopefully those won't be big piles of shit like this one. Alright, so the next one we got here is The Gorilla, 1939. And The Monster Maker, 1944. So those are a couple old ones. We're going back a little bit more. And if you enjoyed this video, I just ask you to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you.